This is Andy Parole for ID Boxing. We are here in Nottingham and I'm joined by promoter Eddie Hearn. Eddie, did you not fancy doing an interview Sunday morning?
Not really, no. Well, we finished in the venue. Obviously, we got kicked out of the venue because it was late. And you messaged me saying, any chance of an interview Sunday morning? No. That's the answer.
It's always the case, Eddie. I'm just not Coogan, basically. Isn't it?
Well, that is true. That is correct. And when you do the numbers of Coogan, you might get the interview on Sunday morning.
Give us time, Eddie. We're getting there. But obviously, we're here in Nottingham. Hughes-Galahad headlines this show. There was some question marks whether the show would go ahead, Eddie, because of obviously Wood-Lara falling through. Was that ever the case? Was it considered dropping?
Probably the easy thing to do. You know, all of a sudden you sold 8,000 tickets. Now you get 4,500 tickets back, and you know it's going to cost you money to go ahead with the show. But at the same time, you've got fighters that you've promised to give activity to. You've got fighters that have been training for 12 weeks. You've got fighters that hope to win world titles, progress their careers, achieve their dreams, etc. And a lot of them, I didn't have the heart to tell them that the show was off, particularly people like Terry Harper and Steffi Ball. So it's a good card with two very good main events, effectively. And we go ahead and expecting a good night.
What are you expecting in that Hughes-Galahad fight? I don't think many people are expecting kind of fireworks from it. It's going to be more of a technical fight.
I'm not sure. I think that at the end of the day, Andy, really, you can't really afford to not have a good fight in their situation, right? They're getting the opportunity to headline a fight card. They need to perform. If they don't perform, one, Maxi's under pressure because he's got to win, but he's really got to look good doing it. That's difficult to do sometimes against Kid Galahad. Kid Galahad's coming off the back of a defeat. A win in a boring fight is not enough. And I actually think these two are going to give us a really good fight at the weekend because I think they're both going to be very active in the fight. Kid Galahad's going to have more in the engine, more in the tank. And Maxi must win, and really to do it in style will give him a great chance to land those big names.
Terry Harper, Rankin, obviously there was a lot of talk about Terry moving up so many weights, but do you feel she'll settle in well enough in that weight at 154?
There's a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, there's still the unanswered questions a little bit from the Baumgardner defeat. I think 130 pounds was brutal for Terry Harper, but she'd been doing it for a long time in her career, moved to 135, then all of a sudden moves to 154, which is bizarre, really, but the opportunity arose. She was even a huge lightweight, but she's not really a 154 pounder. You've seen it with Tasha Jonas as well, but they're good enough to come through and win world titles. Hannah Rankin is full of confidence, you know, and coming off some good wins. She is by far the bigger girl in the fight. And, you know, I know that Terry looks big, but are you eating your way there or are you a natural 154 pounder? It's very difficult to say she is. So for Hannah, I think she'll be looking to walk her down and land those big shots on her. And Terry will be looking to box and move. But can she do it with the same ability that she did at 130 or 135 pounds? A really good fight.
And just obviously walk me through the undercard, the likes of Soldaker, Cyrus Pattinson, Chev Clark, some big opportunities once again for them.
Some of our best young talent. I mean, firstly, the three GB fighters, you know, in Chev Clark, Cyrus Pattinson and Soldakers in big step-ups, all of them. Janae Boston, I think, is outstanding. Rhiannon Dixon as well. But certainly the first, you know, those three GB fighters, time to step up now and move forward.
Now, Eddie, before we do come on to an obvious talking point over social media from the last 24 hours, Fury-Joshua, what is the latest? We've
received the contract. It wasn't really as we expected, but that was a few days ago, and we've had some positive conversations, reshaping that slightly, which seems to be positive. We've still got a long way to go. Obviously, the broadcasters have got to have their discussion. There's not a lot more to tell you other than both teams doing everything they can to try and find a way to make it happen within the time frame.
What exactly was you not necessarily best pleased with from the contract?
I'm not going to go into, you know, he said, she said, and we're working positively. Obviously, it's not unusual, Andy, to get a contract that you're not, you know, over the moon with. And it wasn't that they were playing games or anything like that. It's just really down to the format of the agreement, which is being rectified, and we're working positively to try and get that in the right shape. And I think we're nearly there in terms of the format of that agreement.
How quickly then would you like things to progress on that front?
To move quickly, because what they'll start doing, I mean, it worries me that Mohamed Charles coming out saying he's fighting Tyson Fury on December 3rd. But again, all I'm being told at the moment is that they want to make the fight, and if they do, we're ready to try and make it happen.
Moving away from that and obviously back to this weekend, Canelo-Golovkin 3. Firstly, just reflect on the fight for me, Eddie. What did you make?
It was a good fight. It wasn't obviously as good as the first two. Triple G started slow. I think he'll kick himself a little bit, but I thought Canelo Alvarez was outstanding in the first half of the fight, boxed really, really well, and I didn't really understand the scorecards. I felt like he won the fight widely, but got the victory and now moves on.
Do you think it played on the judges' minds of what happened in the previous two bouts?
Maybe, but there were a lot of rounds where not a lot happened. I mean, if you go back to like the first round and later on in the fight, you know, Golovkin did win a few rounds late on in the fight, but it was very hard to give him many rounds in the first 7 or 8 rounds. And I think, like I said, he may kick himself a little bit, but I thought Canelo boxed outstandingly well.
Now, obviously, onto that big talking point, Eddie. You've been a popular man over social media in this last 24 hours. Firstly, Dan Rafael tweeted that in the US, the pay-per-view numbers were around the 550 to 575,000 buy mark. Just your reaction to those comments first.
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing from Dan because basically, you have to understand there's a lot of people with a lot of agendas. And what they'll do is they'll feed pay-per-view numbers to people. It's all about rivals, really, to an outlet that they hope the outlet will print those numbers. At the time when he printed it, like, it was actually impossible to really give a complete view as to the numbers, and he was told false information. That's why DAZN came out last night and said actually over 1 million people bought the fight, but also at the same time it doesn't. And then he said, oh yeah, nearly half of those were from America. No, a much higher percentage were from America. Probably closer to 80% of the buys came from America. And then he started talking about, yeah, but does it cover the money for the person? What the fuck's that got to do with it? Like, what about the gate? You know, it was one of the biggest gates in Vegas for boxing recently. So it was very bizarre, and, you know, they wanted to put him right. And you know, one hand people are saying DAZN don't have many subscribers worldwide, and then next thing, apparently they've done 430,000 buys for that fight. So the answer to the question is the US proportion of those buys is, you know, not all of them, but a huge percentage more than Dan Rafael said. And don't forget, Mexico and other key territories, it wasn't carried on DAZN in Latin America. So you're talking about markets like Australia, UK, Europe, all obscure time zones. And those buys were very small compared to the US pot.
So what number can you put on the DAZN pay-per-view buys alone in the US, Eddie?
Again, I know the numbers. It's not for me to report it, but it's I think a good way where I can probably do it without getting into trouble is around 80% of the buyers come from the US, around that number. And again, people also don't understand that when DAZN do a pay-per-view, they also have a number of different outlets. You know, it could be DirecTV, could be other platforms as well, and there's also on-platform buys. So there's all kinds of data to come in from the various different platforms. There is traditional pay-per-view outlets, and all that revenue goes to them away from the commission from those outlets. So there's various different platforms that are bringing in those pay-per-view buys. And at the time it was reported, I'm not even sure DAZN would have had a full view of the number. But again, I understand people looking to work against us and want to give certain people information.
So one thing which people picked up on with some confusion or criticism over was combining the pay-per-view buys alongside the subscription buys. Can you just establish as to why they was placed together in that 1.06?
Subscription buys are still a buy. You know, it's a form of buying. The pay-per-view price is different in different territories. Obviously, in the US, it's a certain price point. In the UK, it's a certain price point. In Eastern Europe might be a different price point as well. So in most of the key territories where the big numbers were reported, it was pay-per-view, traditional pay-per-view. In some territories, the smaller territories, it would just be pay-to-view as a subscription, not as pay-per-view, but you still have to pay. It's obviously a different price point for each one.
So on that note, obviously Stephen Espinoza picked up on it, and he was saying that if that's the case, then they've been kind of undervaluing or underselling how many buys they've done previously, because they purely just kind of judge the pay-per-view market, not if they're buying subscribers as well.
But they're paying to watch the fight. They're not subscribing to the individual customers that are paying to watch the fight. Whether you pay on pay-per-view or whether you pay in certain markets, and not many at all, by the way, as just a subscription, you're still paying to watch the fight. So he's trying to cloud judgment on numbers, but the traditional pay-per-view numbers that were the key element of that over 1 million people paying to watch the fight all came from America.
So Stephen Espinoza, Leonard Ellerbe, all of those guys, what are your thoughts on their comments?
I mean, look, you have to understand, it really is me against the world, right? They all want to see me fail. And it's incredibly flattering. Stephen Espinoza, Leonard Ellerbe, Lou DiBella, Oscar De La Hoya. And like, that's amazing for a young, semi-young British fellow going into America and trying to dominate the market. But when Leonard says things like, you know, what's he ever done? I mean, like, I know I'm a little bit confident, but we have just done Canelo Triple G, over $20 million gate, huge. Like, what other fights like this are producing pay-per-view numbers by the way? None. Right? Tell me a fight that's done bigger pay-per-view numbers than that in boxing recently. I mean, it doesn't exist. Also, couple of weeks ago, we were in Saudi Arabia for Joshua against Usyk. Then we did Canelo-Bivol. We sold out MSG for Taylor Serrano. We're about to do Australia. We've got Mexico. We've got Italy. We've got Spain. We've got Katie Taylor, October 29th. We're going to Abu Dhabi for Bivol Ramirez. Like, who is doing that? What is Leonard Ellerbe doing? So I just had to pipe up. But one thing I will say about Leonard Ellerbe, I think he's starting to get it a little bit. Because it wasn't his usual, like, you know, aggressive response. I think he's sort of just starting to get the banter a little bit now. And, yeah, I just had to put him back in his box.
Just on buying the pay-per-view front, there were some people over here who were saying they were struggling to actually purchase it, they was having issues. Have you seen anything like that? Is that a concern as well for Eubank Jr-Benn?
There really wasn't. I mean, DAZN's help desk is spot on. You see that across social media. For every pay-per-view, there's people struggling to get it, whether the connection's bad. I've seen it when we used to do pay-per-views on Sky, so there was no technical problems that were noted of any substance.
Have you got an update if Eubank Jr-Benn can be watched in pubs or restaurants or anything like that?
They will update on that, and obviously there's a big content deal that will be announced shortly. You're going to see a lot of big documentaries for that on terrestrial TV.
Buatsi-Pascal is no longer on. Eddie, just kind of your understanding on that?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. I mean, look, we always said from the very start that we would only take that fight if VADA testing was in the contract. It was in all my interviews, it was in all my correspondence with those people as well, and they chose not to put it in the agreement. Lou DiBella came on last night, oh, you missed the deadline. Look, you get 14 days to sign the contracts from the purse bid. They sent us the contract the night before the deadline, right, without VADA testing in it. We actually didn't miss the deadline because the IBF were communicating with us saying, are you going to sign this contract? And we said, VADA testing must be in there. Not if you sign, then we'll do the VADA testing. Pretty simple. If you're prepared to do it, if you've apparently signed up already, put it in the contract. Anyway, they chose not to put it in the contract. Buatsi made the decision, and I back his decision 100%. He said, I will not make that fight unless testing is in the contract. It wasn't in the contract. Time's up. Conversation over. We look for another fight for Buatsi.
Buatsi-Smith possible?
I love that fight. I love that fight. Both guys want a world title fight, but you know, that's a huge fight, big payday for both guys. But Callum wants to fight for a world title. So does Buatsi. Let's see how it all plays out time-wise, and maybe we can make that.
Just final one, Eddie. Alexander Usyk's done an interview saying that he's got 3 fights left in him. Fury, Canelo, which he classed as a freak fight, and then one back in the Ukraine. Just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great fighter. Wish him all the best.